Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have an awesome show for you this week. We're going to talk about driving the new Toyota Land Cruiser, the Lexus GX, and this is going to be a fun one, the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. I also have a long-term update on our Mazda CX-90, which made, I believe, its first voyage to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. A lot going on in the news world. We'll talk about some news also out of Mazda. Electrify America has a pretty interesting program, I think, about limiting charging percentage and a few other things. With that, I will bring in Senior Editor for all things up and down the West Coast, as well as features, reviews, and I think that's about it. James Riswick.
Hello there. I am back.
You're back. It's been a minute. You've been on a lot of travels, and it's been a minute since we've had you on the show.
I've been exploring servicing my territory along the West Coast. So drove all the way up to Oregon, went to Hawaii. So yeah, I was temporarily Hawaii's editor. That's less useful. Very, very difficult time zone to do any work from. So that only lasted a week. But otherwise, I'm all packed up and going to Goodwood Festival of Speed for the first time this week. So I think you could expect a big photo gallery coming soon of cool cars, many of which I will have no idea what I'm looking at.
I've never been to Goodwood. It's on the list. One of these years I need to make it. It sounds like it's quite the extravaganza. Yeah.
Well, I went to the revival last year, and that was delightful. I love that. I would go to that every year. This is different. This is, I would say, a more hardcore, like modern racing event. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily my cup of tea. So it'll be an interesting thing an enjoyable thing to experience for the first time.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, you have driven several things that I have not experienced yet, but I hope to over the course of the summer as some of these loans make their way across the country. But tell me a little bit about the new Toyota Land Cruiser. That is certainly a big deal car, one of the most anticipated vehicles of the year. It, brings back the icon that we didn't know was going to come back, but hey, it is back. And what do you think of this thing?
Well, I actually drove it in back-to-back weeks with its sister vehicle, the Lexus GX.
Okay.
And I mean, the GX that's what I drove to Oregon. So I'm in Southern California. That is a 13-hour drive, almost 25. I put almost like 2,000 miles on the car. And so I've driven that thing a lot. And then I came back and swapped it for the Land Cruiser First Edition. In fact, the Land Cruiser cost more than the GX because the GX was one rung up from the bottom. And as I discovered, I'd argue that's all you need. Because the bigger wheels on the I had the premium version. The bigger wheels on the luxury, I can't imagine would be anything other than worse. And I did not find myself missing equipment in that car. And then the Overtrail, which is the new element for the GX, is the most off-road capable. Now, why did I request the premium? Well, because the Overtrail only has 2 rows. This was because Lexus thought, well, we created this for overlanders, and overlanders have traditionally removed the 3rd row on their GXs for maximum cargo capacity. You pick up about 5 cubic feet, which is significant because the floor is a lot lower, which is fine. But how many people actually buying the Overtrail are actually going to be overlanding? I would guess that number is pretty low. So I pretty much was told that that'll be an option in the future. But for now, I could only get the 3-row. Problem with that is I wanted to use the roof racks. Only the Overtrail has traditional rail roof racks, meaning you could put on your existing equipment on them. The other trims do not. They just have like kind of these fake looking rails and then static mounting points. So Lexus was kind enough to put on the accessory full roof rack, big honking metal thing, looks cool. But as I would discover, is actually quite functional for the purposes of putting a kayak. I put the kayak up there, and I actually asked the kayak rental person, like, does that thing up there actually make a difference when storing things? She said, yes, absolutely it does. Because not only do you have lots of different like tie and mounting points, the actual stability of having this whole thing support whatever you have up there is an advantage over just two old crossbars. So that was good. Downside is, oh boy, it's loud. You go over 60, you just really start to notice it. And then you go up to over 70 and it becomes quite booming. And honestly, not that different from like having a full-on box on the roof. But by comparison, the Land Cruiser has a more platform rack. The first edition does, and it's an accessory, but it starts after the sunroof. This makes a big difference in terms of the amount of sound coming in through the sunroof. So either way, that was there. That amount of noise was reason one. I kept the GX to about 70 the entire way while to Oregon, even in areas where the speed limit was 70. So I'm driving the speed limit. Whoa, that's craziness in California. So the other reason would be fuel economy. It ain't good. The fuel economy for the new GX is 21 highway, 17 combined. The old one that had the arthritic old V8 was 16 combined. So like, thank God they downsized. Now it has way more torque, and it does make a big difference in terms of performance, but the fuel economy, I only managed 20.4 miles per gallon. So I didn't even get the EPA the EPA highway despite grannying the thing. Of course, I did have the roof rack on, so that could impact, and I had a bike attached to the back and a bunch of cargo. So I think that's probably what it gets. And that's a real calculation too, even though the car actually said the exact same thing. So fuel economy is not great. But in terms of like the performance, that engine really is an advantage over the Land Cruiser, which is hybrid only. It's a hybrid 4-cylinder. And it's not the Prius hybrid Synergy drive one. It's more of their truck style performance hybrid. And I don't think the actual performance would be like huge. I mean, you do have better passing power with the GX with the turbo V6, but boy, does it sound better. It sounds so much better. It's incredibly smooth and refined, whereas the hybrid is not those things. It's pretty gravelly. Toyota does not make the nicest sounding 4-cylinders, and this follows that trend. But then the other thing with the Land Cruiser, back to fuel economy, its fuel economy isn't that great either. I got like 21 on the highway. Now it was less highway. I wasn't going on the same roads. I had a stiff tailwind on the way out to Palm Springs in it, and I had a stiff headwind coming back. I don't know how much that evens out there, but it honestly isn't that different than what you get from the GX or from like the 6-cylinder Land Rover Defender, which gets like 20 combined. So you could get better fuel economy out of the Defender than the hybrid 4-cylinder of the Land Cruiser. Now, obviously these cars, Land Cruiser, GX, mechanically related. Yeah, it's not quite a rebadge, but you can tell quite obviously that they are underneath the skin the same vehicle. But I was most surprised at the difference in ride quality. The Land Cruiser has kind of the telltale body on frame wiggle jiggle over bumps. It feels like a truck. The GX does not have this. I mean, if you hit like low speed, big bumps, yeah, you do feel it, but it is markedly different. And I reached out to Lexus asking, what is the deal here? What factors result in cars that have the same platform having what? And it really comes down to tuning. They just have that. They have the same box of tools, and they just go through it, and they changed various elements. I'm sorry, I cannot for the life of me find my story that details all of this. So you're just going to have to stay tuned for my full story to tell you exactly why, what they did. But it also comes down to Lexus wanting this Lexus, quote, Lexus driving signature. So they want, regardless of vehicle platform, for a Lexus to drive, quote, like a Lexus. And I tell you, the ride quality is really excellent on it. It's very impressive. Now handling, there's quite a bit of body roll and pitch in terms of accelerating and then braking. It's not the full Hummer EV, like prepare for dive, but it's a subtle body motion. I kind of like that. I think it's kind of like it's an enjoyable throwback. It's really fun. Bend has a million roundabouts, and boy, is it fun to go do quick right, left, like, urban chicane. So that was, I kind of like that. It was more than precise. The steering was more than precise enough, and the body control was perfectly fine in the kind of the winding highway bits through Northern California. So and in terms of stability, I have a thing on the roof, and there's a whole bunch of bike and rack hanging off the end. But in terms of, even when I had to pass someone and it gets up to speed real quick, the stability was like flawless. So I'm a big fan of the GX. The Land Cruiser, once again, kind of underwhelms. I don't think it benefits as much as it should from the hybrid powertrain. Not only is the fuel economy kind of meh, and it doesn't sound good, you can't possibly have a third row with it. So, and the third row is functional in the GX, by the way. My wife sat there. She's very short, but like not a problem with space. So I was impressed with the GX. It definitely served its purpose as even better than I expected for this outdoor adventure road test I was embarking upon. That's what I wanted to do. I'm going to an outdoor. The GX is, they said, marketed for small families who like to go on outdoor adventure road trips. Well, that's literally what we were doing. I heard that. I said, okay, well, let's put these two together. Let's do this. And I very much enjoyed my time with it, more so than I did with the Land Cruiser. And honestly, it was cheaper.
There you go.
So get the Lexus. Yeah.
It's interesting when I look at this, my heart is sort of still saying Land Cruiser, but my head is saying Lexus GX. I mean, just for all the things you lay out. I mean, from a powertrain perspective, I know which one I would rather drive. And, you wrote in one of your, many stories you've written about this, that the differences are mainly cosmetic. I think in the past, the Land Cruiser did have some very, distinctive styling that could separate it. Now these are like twins. I mean, it's like, even if you don't get the Land Cruiser 1958 with the rectangular headlights, it's a little tough to tell them apart if you're looking at them pretty quickly. So it's interesting, kind of like 6-8 months out from all of this, as we kind of look back, we'll see where the sales kind of land after a year.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly wouldn't be that surprised if the Lexus could outsell it. Given the price point, it could just come down to availability, really. But I think it looks tremendous. It looks cool. I had nori green, which was just spot on for the outdoor adventure. It looked really cool in orange with a yellow kayak on the roof, I must say. But it's a real good looking SUV. I think it's one of the best ones kind of ever. I think in terms of like applying Lexus's current design language, it wears it so well, as adapted to it. Yeah, it's really cool. I am a fan of that thing.
All right, sounds good. Two vehicles I can't wait to drive. Hopefully, I can maybe get a Bronco and a Wrangler in the fleet around that same time too, and benchmark them all. So,
I would be really interested to drive the GX and the Land Rover Defender. I think that would be super interesting. Maybe throw in like the nicest Grand Cherokee Trailhawk. Oh no, the Trailhawk's 4xe only, so maybe not that. And yes, I have just sent you the photos of my outdoor adventure rig here, so you can so you at least know what I'm looking at, Greg.
Yeah, that's the tricky part about a podcast with photos, but maybe we can find a way to build this into the post. Yeah, that's a good look. That's the right color. That kayak looks great. Kayaking's good fun to do this time of year. I just did some recently. This looks good.
I'll make sure to send that to whomever so it can be part of the album. Or the album art, the podcast art, whatever.
There we go. That's right. We do have podcast art. And frankly, we're probably due for a refresh, a mid-cycle refresh, like 15 years in or something. Get some new album art on there. A number of podcasts I listen to just updated. So I don't know if it's a thing or what, but all right. So, I mean, it's hard to make a smooth fade to this, but the Ioniq 5N is huge deal car for Hyundai from a performance perspective. It gives them a bit of a halo in a segment that, they're making an electric hot hatch. How cool is that? Before I throw this off the rails, of the Ioniq 5 or the Ioniq 6 or the Kia version, the EV6, do you have a preference of those three triplets?
I like looking at the Kia the best, but I like driving the Hyundai, the Ioniq 5
the
most. I guess I like the 6 as well. I guess its body style just isn't that useful. Because it's not even just like hatch versus sedan. It's not actually a very useful sedan. The trunk is very small. So, I'd say I would probably buy the Ioniq, but I have not driven the EV6 GT. I should say.
Okay. Fair enough.
Everything I've read, this Ioniq 5N, it exceeded my expectations. I think this will be one of the first. This is one of the first and only, or one of the first and few future classic EVs. How beyond so? Just like EV, dorks. This thing is cool. His head has character for days, and a lot of it is kind of like by artificial software-based means. It makes fake engine noises and it does fake shifts, and it does all this fun, silly stuff. But honestly, how much of a difference is someone programming the speakers to go versus them going out of their way to make the exhaust go on overrun, right? It's that stuff is kind of recent in performance cars, and once the F-Type started doing that, all of a sudden Benzes and it became more common. So it's not like the car inherently does that. They've gone out of their way to tune the car like that. So I don't know how, mechanically artificial versus software artificial. It's artificial either way. I don't know how much it really matters, but it just adds to so much character of that car. It looks so cool. This thing is the matte. I have the matte robin's egg blue with the orange accents. It looks great. So I can see this car, rightfully so, being at a Cars and Coffee and drawing lots of attention for ages. We will remember this car. And it's also tremendous to drive. It has 600 horsepower, goes up to 641 when you press the go fast button. And the way it doles out that power can be either like the full, like, face flattening, regular old silent launch, or again, you can put it into fake shift mode with fake engine noises, and all of a sudden it sounds like the most like powerful Ford Focus RS. Like it's so cool, and you can shift it. The car can shift it by itself, like an automatic quote shift, or you can do it with paddle shifters, and it'll even let you like hit the quote rev limiter and screw up your launch without like blowing up the engine. It's just goofy, silly fun, and I like. Shouldn't we all love those cars? Because that's what this is. And meanwhile, it's practical, big old back seat and great interior storage, and fuel economy. Hey, it runs on electricity, so I don't have to go to the gas station. So it's like that. It's that only car you'd ever need is what classic hot hatches have always been about, and that's what this is. And it is a hatchback. It's a jumbo one, but in what world how someone could go, oh yes, that says an SUV. No, it isn't. The only thing that prevents it from being the only car you'd ever need is that it's an electric car. So road trips will be difficult at today. Its all electric range is 221, which is like 30 miles worse than my Kia Niro. But whatever. If you own a $66,000 car, I'm thinking you have something else, or can afford a rental car because you definitely don't want to drive on a road trip, especially on a holiday weekend. We reported on and heard some horror stories of people trying to charge their electric cars this weekend.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute during the news segment. A little bit people got a little hot on the hot weekend, but this to me really is like the highest evolution of Hyundai's like performance chops. They hired Albert Biermann from BMW. I remember I met him over in Munich when he was still in charge of the M division, and really cerebral guy, answered all the questions the journalists had at the time. I think it was like a 3 Series launch or something, an M3 or something. And he was just so calm, so like almost soft-spoken. So it made perfect sense that, Hyundai and Kia would bring him over here to try to, like, who better than to give them this kind of edge? And then you add the fact that this is an electric, it's everything. They really check all the boxes here. So, they also hired Peter Schreier, who was, I want to say, an Audi designer.
That was
Kia. And that, I think for a minute he may have even been president of Kia.
Yeah.
So, they know how to go out and get talent, and it's cool to see it directly reflected in the cars. Sometimes, you see these big name execs go into certain places, you never really know what the end result was. I mean, this is the end result for, one of his several very successful projects. So this is another one. Can't wait to drive it.
It's wildly good. And, for the money, like, name an electric, like, I would drive this all day, every day over a Mercedes EQE, the AMG, or the i5, or whatever. It's just better. It's so amusing. And the thing is, you can't even call it a duality, because there's like a multiplicity because of all the different ways it can go about driving. Manual, not manual, no shifting at all, 3 different sounds, or 4, fourth being silence, no sound at all. I just, I don't put anything on. It's just a silent, easy electric car, and I drive my son to school. No big deal. Or I press the right buttons, of which there's way too many, but like the engaging your correct driving mode is nonsense. They need to work on the UI, because it's very confusing to know what the hell you've selected at any given time. But that said, once you figure it out, boom, it's a totally different car, and it's making crackles and pops, and my son's giggling in the background in the back seat because it's making all these fun noises, and it goes fast, and so it's like it greatly exceeded my expectations, and I love it. It's wonderful. It's on the podium for me.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's kind of a tough segue to a short long-term update for our long-term Mazda CX-90, which I would say has not greatly exceeded my expectations. Just that the powertrain and the transmission, they all just can't quite seem to get sorted out. They don't seem to play together well. We've talked about this on the podcast in the past, but they did do a software update that maybe did something, but it's still a little dicey. It seems like when you start up, it wants to be in EV mode, then it kind of clunks into ICE mode, and it's acceleration and gear hunting remain to be a challenge for this powertrain. I think it's among Mazda's first plugins, and I think it sort of shows. Aside from that, though, I mean, the solution is pretty easy. Get the straight six, which I think is a gem of an engine. For this week, for our mini report, I took it up north. I took it to a place some of you might be familiar with. It's called the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So it's about 4 hours from Detroit. It is next to Canada and Wisconsin, for lack of a better way to describe it. So kind of into the woods. Took a ton of stuff, tents, fishing poles, everything, a family of three, plus we'll say 65-pound golden retriever would need for, almost a week in the woods. So, I mean, from a three-row perspective, crossover perspective, it's robust, it's big, it's comfortable. All the things several other editors have weighed in on and generally like. It's very functional. It's just a little, the plug-in hybrid is not quite what I was hoping it would be. I haven't had a chance to charge it in this stint, but I have before, and it charged reasonably well. I actually charged it at a Ford Mobility Hub in downtown Detroit, so I got 26-ish miles of range out of it. So no real issues with the charging. Our road test editor, Zach Palmer, while we were on this very call, appeared and took the Mazda and replaced it with a Lamborghini Urus. So speaking of expectations, that's got some. I can't wait to go drive that after the show here. But yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that on a future podcast. So what, have you driven the CX-90? What do you think of it?
Yeah, I drove, I guess I did drive the plug-in hybrid, but it was a long time ago.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just kind of fine. Mm-hmm. The plug-in hybrid, it's hard to keep it in its all-electric mode, as I recall. Yeah, and I drove the CX-70 most recently, which it's the same car. But I think I was driving, that was the turbo. I was just driving the turbo.
Okay.
The Turbo S, actually. So, no, but I mean, I only plugged in my electrified vehicles until I got my charger with the regular garage plug.
Okay.
Here at my current house, I had to actually plug it into the electrical outlet in the roof because the charge cord wouldn't reach the back wall where the other electrical card is. So I had to plug it in next to the the garage door opener. And in my old house, I'd plug it into the wall, and I was charging a Polestar 2 once, and the house cleaners were there, and they turned on a vacuum cleaner, and the vacuum cleaner almost exploded. It left a big black scorch mark on the concrete floor in my basement. So that's something to keep in mind when you're charging your electric car or a plug-in hybrid. But yeah, for plug-in hybrids, there's not a lot of even if it's slow, it should be able to do most of the capacity overnight.
The one odd note, despite going to one of the roughest, rawest parts of the continental U.S., I didn't have any real off-roading experience other than just going down the driveway basically to the campsite. However, upon taking basically a wrong turn on the way home because there was an accident on I-75, I just found myself on this pretty rough dirt road. So I got to try off-road mode for the first time in a week or two with the car. So that was kind of cool, I guess. It made very little difference, but as you would expect.
Yeah, you did more off-roading than I was going to do in the GX. Okay. Sadly, the road that I could have taken, well, now up in Oregon, which is pretty pockmarked and pretty off-roadish, like the kind of like road that having an off-road vehicle would be helpful for, was not yet open when I was up there. It was still snowed in, so I couldn't do that my planned off-road activity with the GX. So that was one outdoor adventure that I could not accomplish.
All right, sounds good. Let's move over to the news segment. We'll stay with Mazda CX-50 hybrid with a pretty impressive miles per gallon rating, 38 mpg. You also get all-wheel drive with that. You can check out the story, what our associate editor Byron Hurd wrote. That went up. So if you want to dig in, there's some decent press photos. They tried with this, some shots at sunset, or they did some things to make it look like they shot it at sunset. Let's put it that way. I think this could be an interesting, option for people. It's basically a very similar system. I don't know if it's 100% identical, but pretty close to the RAV4.
Oh yeah,
so,
yeah, totally.
You don't think Mazda worked on this one and gave it its own thing?
I think they tweaked it, but it's the same. It's the same. Okay. It's the same hardware.
I think this gives a nice. It's almost to sound like a dealer here. This gives Mazda some new metal to push, and I think there's a fair amount of people in this segment that might look at a RAV4 and also might look at this thing and think, well, hey, this is kind of cool. This could work for me. It's got a little bit of that Mazda kind of styling, that DNA. So that kind of, if you're in the segment, it's just another choice. And the fuel economy is pretty impressive. What do you think of this thing?
Oh, well, the CX-50 is so enjoyable. It's great. It looks fantastic, lovely interior, fantastic to drive. But unlike most of its competitors, key competitors didn't offer a hybrid. And that's a big thing. Like, its two engines were exceptional. Probably, the two of the most agreeable in the segment, but you don't have a hybrid. And I would want a hybrid in this segment, even though I would otherwise be like, I would choose a CX-50. But now this does give it that option. My question is, part of the reason those Mazda powertrains are so exceptional is just because of response of the throttle, response of the 6-speed automatic transmission. It's Mazda. That's what they do so well. So what happens when they now have a Toyota hybrid synergy drive with an electronically controlled CVT? That's totally different. Now they can throttle response, I'm sure they can work on, but in terms of noise and shifting quality, like, that's the big question. And it's a question. I'm not poo-pooing it because I haven't driven it, and let's see what they can do. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see what that results in. Because otherwise, on paper, this could be a class leading vehicle, like with the hybrid. Like we currently our top vehicles in the class are the CR-V and the Kia Sportage hybrid, both of those hybrids, largely on the strength of how good their hybrids are. We really like the CX-50. It's very enjoyable. It's not as practical as those other ones, but what you lose in practicality, you gain in driving verve and style. That's not nothing. That is a choice I would probably make. But the powertrain, what difference does it make? So, yeah, we'll see. I think that will be one of the more intriguing stories to come. I would raise my hand big time to go on that press event, because I'd love to talk to their engineers, and because they're usually very open about, like, even to the point of like crazy minutia about what they did, and then the efforts that they go to in terms of driving feel and just teeny tiny subtle things that you wouldn't even think of to answer the questions like, well, how come Mazdas seem to just drive better? They just feel better. And it's actually, they'll go into the laundry list of little tiny things that they do, from the exact seating and control placement to just more advanced, like crazy advanced systems that you can't really wrap your head around, but yet actually does this kind of small but ultimately effective thing. They're always enjoyable to talk to. So it'd be interesting to know what happens when that mentality gets together with somebody else's equipment. So yeah, be cool.
That does sound like a press trip that would be out your way and your neck of the woods. So we'll see. Yeah, well, this is a bit of a segue here. Speaking of your neck of the woods, California, Electrify America is going to cap charging at about 80%, 85%. The idea here is to keep people moving through the chargers, not filling all the way up to more than, frankly, even some manufacturers recommend. It sounds like it was tough for the long holiday weekend with people trying to drive in California. It's a pilot program, 10 stations. Without having had too much of a problem with this myself, I think this is a good idea. I mean, the chargers around here, there's a lot of EVs in Michigan, but compared to like California, it's, no comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like as far as managing the current relatively small infrastructure, this is a good plan to do it. I would have no issues if they rolled this out. How do you feel?
This is the scenario. This is why they're doing it. So I drove the Hyundai Ioniq 6 to Las Vegas in January for CES. Yeah. I had no problems charging on the way there. The I-15 corridor was fine. I mean, sure, I got lucky at one, but the other one was total. It's still a bit of a crapshoot, but in that case, really no problem. Once there, though, in Vegas, my hotel did not have charging. So I had to find a charging station in town. They were all full. I had to wait in line to then charge and wait to charge. In other words, I was wasting the time I have on Earth. And there's few things I hate more than that. And sitting there, and so I finally get to charge after like 45 minutes of waiting to wait. I finally get on the charger, and it's cruising along. It's going fast, actually. My experience was fine. I look over, and this guy in a Polestar 2, which has free charging, there's your problem. He is sitting there, and the charger is at over 90%, and it is just inching along, just tiny little trickle. Like, we talked about plugging your car into just the regular toaster plug in your garage. At one point, it was basically at that level. My home charger was smoking its charge speed because it's so slow. And that guy's just sitting there, lean back, watching his life disappear. Meanwhile, there's a line of cars in front of him just looking to get just enough to get the hell out of Vegas. And the same thing happens. It's really these free charging cars, or it's like bolts that take forever. If you do have a slow charging car, holy cow. This is why, is so you don't deal with that. People taking advantage of the free charging, or just wanting to eke out as much as possible. It's just so inefficient to do that in terms of time. And they're doing it around cities, I think, for this reason. Now, road trips, I wouldn't hate that too, but I guess there is a scenario where you need to go to 100 in order to get to your next charge station. So I guess they don't want to screw around with that. Just in case you have like a car with a rinky-dink range. But so that's why the pilot program is really only in the greater Los Angeles area. Neither of which are the ones that are closest to me, by the way. But I think it makes all the sense in the world. And, if you have an issue with that, I'm sorry. If you can't charge at home, then that's a different scenario entirely. But let's be fair to people. You taking advantage of every ounce, every last drop of free charging is not the same as me waiting just to get my car on the road again. So that's not, yeah. So I think it's wonderful. I think that's smart, and I should be said, it comes directly from customer feedback. So it's not like some draconian corporate thing, like they want to churn people through. It's because people were complaining. So, good thing.
No, I think it makes sense. I think, as we try to, as electric vehicles become more commonplace, we need more chargers, and that means making them more usable. If you go to a gas station, worst case scenario, you're stuck behind some dude gassing up his Excursion or something, and there's a finite amount of time and he's going to be done. With EV charging, it can take some time. It can take a minute. And frankly, it's almost like sometimes you feel like you can't have nice things. Like if you're going to have guy trying to top off at 100% at the expense of the line backing up, that's just, I don't know how you legislate against boorish behavior like that, but it's also a thing like, well, I think you got to do it. So, there's a lot of charging companies out there right now too, as they all try to figure out the rules of the road. And this would make me more likely to seek out an EA station.
Yeah, we don't really have much of a choice around here. There's a couple of other companies, but it's Electrify America or bust. Really.
We have ChargePoint around here, and they're not great, Bob. They're tricky. I feel like it's better than a coin toss that they're going to work, but they can be tricky. Let's put it that way. That's a whole other podcast.
To speak to some of the charging issues. I own an electric car. I would not take it on a road trip. There's no way in hell I would have driven it to Oregon. Could I have literally done it? Yes. But the crapshoot in terms of, does the charger work? Is there an hour line or worse? I can't stop where I want to stop. I have to now stop at this place and then to the next one for lunch because this one's in a terrible grocery store parking lot. It's just it's not there yet, right? It doesn't mean it's not going to get there. That's the important thing. We're not there yet, but so many people own an ICE car anyway, or even if I just owned that Ioniq 5N, I'd rent a car because, I don't know if you saw this on Instagram. I posted it on, but Motor Trend's Scott Evans. He drove their new long-term Fisker Ocean, which he got earlier in the week. That's a whole good luck, buddy. He drove that and ended up on some Central Valley I-5 Electrify America from hell. In the line of electric cars, he waited 2 hours and 45 minutes just to charge. Because there were only 6 stations and it just backed up forever. That is my nightmare. If I showed up and I saw that, he had 6 miles of range left, so he had no choice. But I think I would abandon the car. I would find the closest train station or Greyhound station within 6 miles and just leave the car there and get to it someday, pay to ship it. There's no way I would wait that long. I could not do that. I just couldn't. That is my absolute nightmare, and I don't think I'm alone. And until they get, there's a station. That's nice. Apparently, 5 of them were working, which is good, right? Out of the 6. But the volume is not there. Even if they had the 12 station thing that they have in Baker, California, which is huge for an EV charging station or EA, it still wouldn't have been enough. Again, that's not to say they can't get there. because Rome wasn't built in the day. But I hear you when you say, right now, this doesn't make sense for me.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you feel if this makes sense or not, but we know Porsche's legendary line of the 718s, the Boxster and the Cayman are going to go electric. And we've known this for a while, but we had a recent Reuters report that essentially confirmed the timeline. I take a bit of I'm of two minds on this one. I just drove a 718 Boxster and really enjoyed it. It was, to me, like the perfect start to summer. I wrote a column that got so long-winded, I think it turned into a road test. I was very much taken by the car. I went on the launch of whatever the edition was in, I want to say Mallorca back in 2014. So I got to drive both of them on tracks. So on a track. So really, to me, a memorable car. And one of the reasons I think you're attracted to the Porsche brand. So I'm a little, as much as I think EVs have a great place in the new automotive landscape, and I think it makes sense for them to do this for this model line, because I think it'll make some really interesting driving dynamics, having those batteries mounted in a way that will make for an outstanding center of gravity. If anything, this opens up more styling opportunities for these. And I think it could be as significant as when they first rolled out that original Boxster concept, say 30 years ago. So I think, it's definitely progress, but I'm a little sad to see the ICE, option go away, be faded off. The way I look at it is there's some cars that I feel like are so just cars, they're automobiles, that I would have zero issue if they carried on, perhaps at a small volume internal combustion engine. And this to me is one of them. Driving that 6-speed manual, I literally I noted the time. It, struck me. 9:07 on, let's see, March, or it's not March, it certainly wasn't warm enough then. Thursday, looks like early May 24th. So there you go. I mean, to me, that's like when summer kicked off. So if I'm asking for stuff, I wish Porsche would find a way to make these things keep their engines around for a while. What do you think? Is this blasphemy? Am I wrong? Am I crazy? Are you crazy?
I think it's sad. I mean, it's being killed by some German or EU regulation I don't understand, right? I'm of the opinion that cars like the 718 Boxster, two-seaters, name a Ferrari, like exotic third or fourth sports cars virtually no one's commuting in, do not matter. This is like going after them and not allowing them to exist is just pointless. That's not what keeping them around is not going to be like the straw that destroys the earth from climate change. It's all of the mass market cars, luxury and mainstream. It's the boring cars that no one will miss when they're gone. Those are the ones that need to go electric. If all of those go electric, great. Or even if they go hybrid, whatever. That's the difference. The 718 does not matter. They sell so few of them, and they are ultimately driven so little. I have a 2-seat Roadster. The damn thing has 46,000 miles on it and is 25 years old. That's your bar. Who cares? That is not what that's not what this about. So the fact that these regulations are going to kill cars like this, I just think it is sad. I see how it's very elitist to write some regulation that has a loophole for 2-seat Roadster. If it has 2 seats, it can have an internal combustion engine. But again, it still has 2 seats, right? It doesn't matter. It's not going to be driven enough to make a difference.
That's a really interesting argument too. When you look at I know SEMA has advocated for special loopholes in the way cars can be restored and different crash test ratings, things like that, because their argument is these are toys. They are not daily drivers. Your 1973 Cutlass that was restored with a crank motor does not need to meet the same standards as your 2023 Toyota Camry. No idea why I pulled the 73 Cutlass out of thin air, but as an example. And I think, to your point, I think there is some practical considerations. I don't think these cars are quite to the point of like horse racing or owning a pony, but the uses are very narrow. And there's a reason, this captured my attention. I was driving the 4-cylinder 718. We're not even talking about the GTS or something.
Yeah.
So I think it's not like this car is putting the hole in the ozone layer. I think, we should still be able to have fun in some senses. Now, it's a slippery slope. This car, 4-cylinder, Porsche, well, how do you account then for like a Hellcat or something? What are you going to do? Make them all drag racers and remove the back seat so they can still be around? It's tricky.
That's what you would be looking at, yes.
Yeah.
But,
2-seat Suburbans?
It's yeah, right. Like you have some coach builder who puts in seats after the fact. Yes, you would have to be a little more smarter than just that. But there's a world in which that exists. And it's not going to happen. But otherwise, like a Miata's dead, right? Like if you go to that extreme of like nothing, everything must be electric. And I don't think that should be the thing. I think a smart way to do it is to go for the meat of the market. You go for the meat of the market. You change as much as humanly can, make it either as efficient as you can, or you make it go all electric. And there you go. That's what you need to do. You do not need perfection 100% switch over. That's, but there are bigger fish you could fry in terms of CO2, be it power generation, commercial shipping, my God, aviation, computing power from AI. That's a big one you don't hear a lot about, but the amount of CO2 that goes into creating the power to do all these AI generators, holy cow. Not AI generators, the computing power that's required just for like the little AI widget in Google. I don't think that the 718 is really the thing that will doom us.
All right. So we've got Goodwood. We've got kind of a pretty, speaking of niche sporting cases, the Caterham Puma, which I think is super cool. It's we'll start with the Caterham. They used basically repurposed Royal Air Force helicopter metal to make this, it's green, sporty looking little kind of a go-kart sort of thing. It looks awesome. I mainly throw this on because last weekend was Silverstone. Upcoming is Goodwood. It just kind of seems to be in the zeitgeist this week. It's in the ecosystem, pick your cliche. This is cool, I think. It's got tail numbers on it. Other than just wild and cool, there's no real reason we're talking about it. But, I don't know if you get a chance to drive one when you're over there next week. I think we'd take a review.
Yeah. Well, no, if you Google Caterham Puma, you come up with a youth football team in the UK.
That's a great name for a football team.
Yeah. But if you look a little closer, then it is, it's inspired by a decommissioned Puma helicopter. So it's matte green. So it looks pretty cool. I think the helicopter looks cooler, frankly. The Caterham, you get those in England. We do not get those, obviously. Looks kind of wild.
All right. Well, any final thoughts as you get ready for Goodwood?
Not really. Should be fun, but going to be a busy couple of weeks. When I get back, I'll be driving the new Hyundai Santa Fe. That wild looking thing. I'll be driving the new Infiniti QX80, which is apparently much better than the old one. New Nissan Kicks. Be going on up the road to drive that. And then eventually Pebble Beach. So, yeah, it'll be a busy month and change.
Be interested to hear what you think about the Santa Fe. I drove that 6 weeks ago and got a lot of attention from that. 6 weeks, what is time? More like 3 months ago. But
yeah,
it was pretty gnarly. It had that kind of bronze copper paint on it. A couple people thought it was an EV, which I thought speaks to the moment. And yeah. Well, while you're over there, have a full strength Guinness for me. I hear it tastes better over there. At least it did the last time I was over there. So that's all the time we had this week. If you enjoy the Autoblog Podcast, please give us 5 stars in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the show. If you'd like us to spend your money, we would like to do that too. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.